A global panic is now putting the metals market in play. Gold and silver all-time highs. We're going to break it down with an expert that you don't want to miss today, and it's going to be a hot one. Let's just jump right into it. I do want to thank our sponsor, and that, of course, is Tangem. And if you guys are brand new to crypto and you don't know what self-custody is, well, you're going to learn fast, because when you look at crypto and what the banks are trying to do around taking yield, well, self-custody may be your only bastion of faith, and that is where you can go into Tangem. Use our link down below. It's going to get you a little bit of a discount, and the best thing is it gets you into self-custody. And did you know you can hold digital gold on your Tangem card? That's right. You can hold digital gold in your self-custody wallet. Very easy to set up, super secure. It's one of the best things out there. All right, before we get started and bring in our guests, I want to go to a quick Bessent clip around Don't Panic. Take a look.
Again, I would say this is the same kind of hysteria that we heard on April 2nd. There was a panic. And what I'm urging everyone here to do is sit back, take a deep breath, and let things play out. As I said on April 2nd, the worst thing countries can do is escalate against the United States.
All right, so we remember Liberation Day, the escalations that came up, came down, the markets were in mayhem, all of those kind of crazy things. And of course, that I think also began a little bit of movement into the metals market, which we have seen do nothing but go up the chart. So joining me now is the #1 expert in the world when it comes to gold, silver, and metals, and that's Andy Schectman. How are you, Andy?
It's good to see you, Paul. Thanks for having me back, brother.
Yeah, well, listen, Miles Franklin is doing a lot of business today because gold and silver both are cracking all-time highs. We are seeing an absolute unbelievable move on this. When you look at what's happening around the world, first of all, I guess we'll just get the big question out of the way. Can this sustain at the kind of acceleration we're seeing?
You know, Paul, I think the real question is, what is the fair price of gold and silver, two assets that have never been allowed to find price discovery? And I would say the institutions closest to the metal are prioritizing control of deliverable gold and silver rather than promises of future availability. And, you know, I think that there's a realization that this game that has been played by the West of holding down the paper price of gold and silver, both for distinctly separate reasons, is coming to an end now, because what you are seeing is insanely large deliveries, whether it be off of the LBMA or into or off of the COMEX. The December delivery month, as an example, for gold, we saw about 68 million ounces delivered, the largest December ever for silver, ever in the history of the COMEX since 1974. 4 or 5 million ounces of gold as well. You know, you're talking billions and billions and billions of dollars, but this is happening every single month since a year ago, November, when he won the election. And, you know, you look at what's happened just in the few days since in the January deliveries, which is not a primary delivery month, and we've already seen north of 40 million ounces of silver delivered again. So in the last 40 days, you're already, and there's still another, 10 days plus to go, we're already at 110, 115 million ounces of silver delivered to COMEX, and somewhere in the neighborhood of 5-6 million ounces of gold delivered. And so the question really is, who's doing it? And at that level, I would argue these people don't do it just for the hell of it. So yes, I do think it can go, and I do think that none of us know where it stops, only because it's never been allowed to find, they have never been allowed to find real price discovery.
Well, we're looking at a $94 silver right now as we kind of just look at the tracking of silver in general. The movement of this chart, absolutely insane. If you look at gold now hitting another all-time high, 4670 or 4760, as we are recording this right now, and a big day right now on gold, up almost 4%. So this indicates some pressure in the market. Many people would look to some of the actions that President Trump is in the middle of. I have a tweet here that kind of shows this, and that was this little visual right here that was put out by the White House, of course. And it shows the United States, Canada, Greenland, Venezuela, all under one flag. Point being is this gets into a very dicey narrative for the United States. Do you think metals have been the beneficiary of this, just not good position in terms of market positioning right now? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you go back to the weaponizing of the Treasury market and against Russia, right, wrong, or indifferent. Look, part of the world says, look, you guys went to Iraq 22 years ago looking for weapons of mass destruction. You didn't find them. You destroyed their country, toppled their regime, and you're still there today. And yet you can tell us how to do things. You're fiscally irresponsible. You're nearly 200 trillion in debt. We talk about 38, but don't forget Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, government military pensions. You're wasting $1 trillion or incurring $1 trillion in debt every 100 days. And you want to tell us how to do things? And so this vision of the moral high ground that we established after World War II, you could argue they view us as having trampled upon it. And so when you see these moves that are, I guess, creating animosity, either on the surface or below, you're looking at a situation right now where I guess you could say that the West is still pricing gold and silver in terms of paper pricing.
Yeah.
And the rest of the world is pricing it in terms of physical pricing. So I think they are a primary benefactor of this type of rhetoric.
Well, with that kind of statement, you have to kind of consider what's going on here in the U.S. If you look at this from a jobs growth standpoint, we've started to see not great job growth. Of course, granted, we saw inflation kind of holding, and even if you look at Truflation data right now, it seems to be slipping slightly. Then you add in the fact that we have the Supreme Court not issuing a ruling on Trump's tariffs, which means does this actually put this on a rising possibility of the tariffs holding? If the tariffs hold, this is going to continue to put market disarray in play, meaning risk assets probably will continue to bleed against metals. Metals probably will continue to go up. Of course, to the point I'm getting at is where does this stop right now before we start to see market stabilization? Or do you think we even see market stabilization anytime soon?
Well, again, I would just say, where is real price discovery? I mean, you look at, to me, when you take a look at who's been buying the gold for the past several years, it's been the most well-informed traders in the world. The central banks forget about how much money they have. They have more than anyone, but they know the playbook. What is unusual is to see the same thing happening here in the United States with the most sophisticated traders on the planet on Wall Street that are bringing in billions upon billions upon billions upon billions every single month. I think I could argue that this is actually a plan, that they are trying to do this. And I know that sounds crazy, but it has been my feeling for a very long time that there's an economic theory called Triffin's dilemma. Vice President Vance has talked about it. The previous economic advisor, the real knucklehead that he was, Jared Bernstein, did write a report called Dethrone King Dollar. Both Vance and Bernstein advocate for losing the reserve status. That is a privilege we can no longer afford. And you got the fund Van Eck, the fund group Van Eck, who just came out talking about if the dollar really does lose reserve status, which I think it will. Honest to God, I believe they want to soft default on the reserve status to peg the back end of the bond market with gold, using the Genius Act, all of this together. If I were to go through the whole thing with you, it'd take 5 minutes, but what they're trying to do, I believe, is to massively debase the dollar, to shed the reserve status, to bring back manufacturing. And the only way you do it is link the back end of the bond market to gold. Now, Van Eck came out and just said that if they do indeed, the base case would be 39,000, and they're just using M0 money, which is this is the foundation of everything else that is the money supply. And if it goes up to global M2, they're talking about the price of gold going up to 184,000. Now, this isn't someone in this industry. This is Van Eck saying it, and their bond team saying it. So how high can it go? I guess we will see. What I have learned, Paul, in this industry is that bull markets go higher than anyone ever thinks possible. These things have always been in play because no one stood for delivery. Less than 1% of contracts stood for delivery. Now you have a whole global south that is sophisticated, motivated, wealthy, and coordinated. And they have been standing for delivery for a very long time. And it is my belief someone got to Trump as he was coming in and said, if we don't join this party, it's game over. And the amount of metal that's come in is 4 feet of snow in Death Valley in July. It's that big of an anomaly, Paul. It really is. And no one in the mainstream is talking about it. I'm screaming about it, that this is just out of control, unusual. And then, of course, we just by chance happen to make silver a critical mineral. And all of these things are starting to fall into place. And a report by the Economic Times came out 2 weeks ago and said, by the way, those 8 banks that have been short all these years, well, the 5 US banks have just flip-flopped and gone long. This is about sovereign nations securing gold and silver for the future, for perhaps a new system, whatever is being put in place. It's very different, honest to God, very different than anything I've ever seen in 35 years.
Andy, okay, so we have tokenized gold right now, whether you look at Paxos, XAUT, both, of course, have been performing very well in terms of adoption. We've continued to see more wallets holding these. What about silver? Do you think we're going to get a tokenized silver product in the market anytime soon?
I don't see why not. The only hindrance to the tokenized silver could actually be supply. And, you know, you take a look at something like SLV or GLD, which allows naked shorting and these kinds of things. It distorts what the real amount of silver is. You know, if they figure out a way to allow redemption in usable forms, instead of 1,000-ounce bars or something like that in small, usable form, I think it's a game changer to figure out how to do it right. But you look at a company like Tether, you know, all you hear is they've bought $14 billion in gold, which supports my theory, by the way, especially with the new Stablecoin Genius Act. Where's all that money going that is backing the Treasury yield? Where's it going? My feeling is it's going into things like gold to continue to devalue the dollar, to push up the price of gold, to back the back end of the bond market. But that's, again, we can talk about that some other time. But what I'm saying is you never hear anything about them accumulating silver. At least I haven't. And so I think it would be great. There's a void for it for sure.
Yeah, hopefully, Paolo, if you're listening, this is a big need right now. If that, again, granted, if you can get physical custody of it. Hey, listen, I've got a clip here. Actually, I want to just show the tweet. This was BlackRock CEO Larry Fink. He says that global elites have lost the public's trust. I'm of the mind of, did they ever have it? But do you think that maybe they are realizing it for the first time here? Is that, oh my gosh, we actually have 1.6 billion millennials, Gen Z, and Gen A's, alphas, that are essentially now getting ready to enter the market for finance, and we no longer control it. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, how do you think Mondami got elected? I think it was the turnout of the Gen Z who are very disenfranchised. You look at 20 years ago, the average price of or the average age of a first-time home buyer was like 28. Now it's 42 or so. Yeah. And the young kids can't afford anything. And you got this K-shaped economy, the Cantillon effect, where the poor are getting poorer and the richer are getting richer because their assets have gone up, extremely high over the last several years. I don't know I saw the number, but the top 1% has increased their wealth by like $11 trillion, while the bottom 50% is struggling just to put food on the table. And that's because, like you were talking about earlier, the inflation numbers that we are supposed to believe out of the BS, the BLS, when they call us the CP lie, the CPI, they say it's 3%. No, it's not 3%. It's much higher than that. If you use like you said, true inflation, you're much higher than that. But, even still, here they're going to pivot right now 50% away from their target and inject more inflation into the system, making it more difficult for the Gen Z to stay afloat, making it easier for the people who have assets to become wealthier. It's a very tough predicament we're in. But yes, I do believe that on every level, whether it be politically or even things like our judicial system, our institutions like Wall Street, the COMEX, all of these places that were fraud. I mean, even look at the Federal Reserve. All the people that have under Fed Chairman Powell's watch have been, accused of and or kicked out of the Fed because of fraud. And you look at what's happening in, I even hate to say it, my old home state of Minnesota, fraud all over the place. You bring in Doge, they find $2 trillion that can be cut, and they come up with only about 200 billion, about 30 plus hours of spending by the US government. Fraudulent. All of this stuff, I think, is making much of the world look at, like you're saying, the establishment and all of our institutions as needing a change. And that's where I think you get this Gen Z turnout in New York to elect, a guy that is almost socialist. So, I don't know, crazy times for sure. But yes, I think we're at that point, the fourth turning, if you will.
Yeah, and it also aligns with what's going on with the Clarity Act right now. The fact that we had the banks pushing so hard to, rip the yield concept out, destroy DeFi, try to break down privacy, all of that has been pushed onto Americans. I think this may be a backfire on the status quo, looking a little bit too far into the cookie jar, and we finally have the numbers in terms of demographics, because we don't have the numbers from a financial standpoint, but if you start to compile that at 3x, that, especially to your point of the wealthy getting even more wealthy, maybe we're at a point of a pivotal issue right now. Here was Peter Schiff saying that you should sell the Bitcoin, buy silver. He thinks it's going to collapse. That's his, his story all the way around. Do you think diversity is the route, or do you think, no, right now, metals is the only way?
I think that we see the world very similarly. We walk in the door largely because of the same reason. Maybe the crypto crowd goes this way to make a profit and the gold crowd this way to preserve it, but it's like a Reese's peanut butter cup. They're better together. And I do think that taking profits off the table that you've made in the run-up in crypto and putting it into gold and silver, taking some of that risk off the table is a good idea. And instead of being divisive with one another, I think having a united front not only increases your understanding monetarily of what's going on, but I think it makes your entire portfolio and your peace of mind a lot better as well. I think Peter's a brilliant man, and I think I follow a lot of what he does. I think creating a rift between the two communities is a mistake, and I think instead they'll just tune out the reasons that he's talking about. I think finding some form of common middle ground and uniting in understanding of what's wrong in the system and finding different pathways of getting there, but respecting one another and look, if you never listen to other people's opinions, you never grow, and you learn more and more about less and less till you know everything about nothing. So while I am not someone who understands crypto the way you do, I come on this show as much for me to learn and be open-minded as it is to help your viewers understand my world a little bit. And that to me is strength in understanding, strength in portfolio, strength in argument, and understanding that there are more than just one way to skin a cat. I think intellectually he's at the top of the food chain, but I think it's a mistake to alienate all these people.
Well, I would agree with you on that, because I've known Peter, we've had him on the show for years and years, but really until we started having you on the show, did I actually say, wait a minute, metals are a thing. We need to diversify our assets. And we did that, because it was that kind of point that you just made, which is, a much more even keel of, hey, both assets, whether you believe in stocks, bonds, you look at high equity yields, you look at what's going on in the metals market, and then obviously in the crypto market, we look at all of them. So thank you for bringing us into the metals game, because it's
man, I appreciate that. That's awesome.
It paid off. Hey, I've got a clip here I want to get your opinion on real quick. This is Chamath Palihapitiya coming in from the All In podcast. Listen to what he had to say.
I will pick copper.
Okay, copper.
We are still completely underestimating how short we are in terms of the global demand supply dynamics of a handful of critical elements that we need. Again, in the Trump doctrine view of the world, that is no longer as multilateral as it was, and we need to have unilateral national security. And if you look through that lens, the asset that is set up to go absolutely parabolic is copper. And the reason is that it is, at least as it stands today, the most useful, cheap, amenable, conductive material that we have. That material manifests in everything from our data centers to our chips to our weapon systems. It's just everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. And right now, Jason, we are on a path by 2040 where we will be short about 70% of the global supply at current course and speed. And so I will pick copper.
All right, there you have it. One of the world's best investors out there. I mean, you know, if you look at the plays he's done so far, he's been wrong sometimes. Tom Lee has gone on record talking about copper being an unsung hero. You look at the world's largest online bullion exchange, completely sold out of copper. Let that sink in. And you look at just what it can be used for, which is what Chamath was getting at right there. What do you say, Andy?
I think he's right, and I think he's right, and I think that silver and copper are nearly identical in many respects in their, certainly their conductivity purposes. Silver's a little bit better than copper. Copper's less money, but copper has more uses. They both have plurality in uses. Now, I don't stock, as a precious metals company, copper coins because they've always been, in my mind, too bulky for, you know, I would prefer to buy something like Freeport-McMoRan stock, which I own. I think he's right. And, you know, there is no coincidence that both of them have been added to the critical minerals list.
Yep.
And Trump said within the next 180 days, by law, they will find a government-sponsored price floor underneath them. And that's, I think, to incentivize mining here in the United States, because if you look at the low-lying fruit that has been picked already, by the way, much of the silver that we find is a byproduct of mining for copper. In fact, only about 18% of the silver that was brought to market last year came from primary silver mining. The rest was copper, zinc, and maybe lead. I forgot. I think it's lead. But anyways, as they continue to mine, the all-in sustaining cost, like of silver, has gone way up. And so you have to put a floor underneath it to incentivize mining and here in the States.
Going.
So yeah, I think copper is a good one. Wouldn't own it physically. I would own it in the form of a stock because I think not enough people understand it.
Yeah.
Even the diehards, even someone like me, I would look at it and say, well, okay, what am I going to do with the copper? Silver is different. It's been money for 5,000 years. But what he is saying is spot on, in my opinion.
Yeah. Listen, a lot happening right now, guys. We are going to continue to follow this very closely. Andy, thanks so much for coming on the show today. We appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. You're a class act, Paul. Thanks for having me, buddy, and hope to do it again.
If you like this video, hit like and subscribe, drop a comment down below, and also join our free private member group. The link is in the description.